You're sitting in 14A, the seatbelt sign clicks off. That sound, the chime you've heard 1,000 times, signals the end of the climb. You unbuckle, reach for your phone, stretch your legs. But here's what nobody tells you. That click is not just for you. It's a signal to the cockpit. A hidden call-out. The pilot just received a confirmation that the cabin altitude is below 10,000 feet. And what he does next, the switch he flips, the checklist he initiates, determines whether the next hour of your flight is routine or a hidden emergency you'll never see on the safety card. Today, we peel back the cockpit door and reveal the truth about the seatbelt sign. Why pilots turn it off even when turbulence is forecast. The unwritten rule that keeps flight attendants in their jump seats. And the one thing you should never do when you hear that chime. Because the safest passengers are the ones who understand the system's real logic. By the end, you'll see the cabin differently. Every chime will carry a hidden meaning. And you'll know why the pilot's voice sounds different when the sign stays on. The seatbelt sign is the oldest rule in aviation. Every passenger knows the drill. When the sign is on, you stay seated. When it's off, you can move. Simple. Obvious. The card says it in 12 languages. But here's the paradox. The sign is not primarily about turbulence. It's not about bumps in the air. It's a crew coordination tool disguised as passenger safety. The regulation, FAA 14 CFR 121.571, states that the sign must be illuminated when the cabin altitude is above 10,000 feet. Not when turbulence is expected. Not when the ride is rough. When the cabin is at a specific pressure altitude. Think about that. The sign clicks off at 10,000 feet on every flight. Clear skies, rough air. Doesn't matter. The rule is altitude, not weather. And that means every passenger has been trained to obey a sign that was never about them. If you've ever sat in a window seat and watched the wing flex during turbulence, you know that feeling of controlled uncertainty. You look at the sign. It's off. But the plane is shaking. Something doesn't add up. You're right. The sign stays off because the pilot is following a different protocol. One that prioritizes crew mobility over passenger safety. The flight attendant needs to serve drinks. The cabin needs to feel normal. The airline wants you to forget you're in a metal tube at 35,000 feet. So the sign stays off. That's the paradox you've been living through. You've felt the turbulence, seen the sign off, and trusted the system without knowing why. If you want to understand every hidden decision the cockpit makes, subscribe. Because the real rules are never announced. And in the comments, tell me, how many times have you unbuckled at the chime only to feel the plane shake? Reply, altitude, if you've noticed the pattern. But here's the kicker. When the sign is off, you are statistically more likely to get injured during unexpected turbulence. The FAA recorded 1,134 turbulence-related injuries to passengers and crew in 2022. That's a 12% increase from 2021, and the majority of those injuries happened when the seatbelt sign was off. The sign is not predicting turbulence. It's reacting to it. And by the time it clicks on, it's often too late. Remember what I said about the click? That sound you heard at the beginning? It means the pilot is about to make a decision, a hidden choice that affects every passenger in the cabin. Here's the hidden cockpit logic. When the seatbelt sign clicks off at 10,000 feet, the pilot initiates a specific call-out. Cabin altitude, 10,000 feet, seatbelt sign off. That phrase triggers a cascade. The first officer confirms the pressurization system. The flight attendants release the lavatory doors. The cabin enters the cruise phase. But the decision to turn the sign off is not automatic. The pilot chooses, and that choice is based on a risk calculation, not a hard rule. Some pilots leave the sign on for 15 minutes after reaching 10,000 feet. Some turn it off immediately. The difference? Experience. And the unwritten rule: the sign is a tool, not a constraint. In 2019, a Boeing 737 encountered clear air turbulence at 34,000 feet. The seatbelt sign had been turned off 8 minutes earlier. 4 passengers who had unbuckled were thrown from their seats. 2 suffered spinal injuries. The NTSB report concluded that the pilot's decision to turn off the sign early contributed to the severity of the injuries. The pilot knew turbulence was forecast. He turned the sign off anyway, because the airline's schedule, the pressure to keep the cabin comfortable, overrode the safety protocol. That's the hidden layer. The seatbelt sign is not a safety guarantee. It's a negotiation between the cockpit and the cabin, a compromise between passenger comfort and crew survival. And the passenger, the person strapped into 14A, is the last to know which side is winning. If you've ever been on a flight where the seatbelt sign stayed on for 20 minutes after takeoff, you know the feeling. Something is wrong, but no one tells you. That feeling is designed. The pilot is keeping the sign on because he sees something you don't: a weather radar return, a wind shear alert, a pressurization anomaly. The sign is the only signal the cockpit sends to the cabin. Everything else, the turbulence, the delay, the hidden risk, stays behind the door. Here's the deeper layer. The 12-minute oxygen mask timer is designed around the same logic. The mask gives you 12 minutes because the pilot should only need 8. But the seatbelt sign is different. It doesn't have a timer. It has a human decision. And human decisions fail. In 2021, a NASA ASRS report described a first officer who forgot to arm the spoilers during an emergency descent. The descent took 13 minutes instead of 8. The passengers never knew. But the first officer did. He reported that he had been distracted by a seatbelt sign that stayed on after the emergency. The sign is not just a light. It's a link in a chain that can break. That chain is what separates a routine flight from a hidden emergency. You've just seen how one decision, one link, can fail. Subscribe to keep following these chains through every system in the cabin, because the more you see, the safer you become. And in the comments, type link if you've ever had a flight where you knew something was off but couldn't name it. The truth is unsettling. The seatbelt sign is not about you. It's about the crew. It's about the pilot's decision to prioritize cabin service over your safety. It's about the airline's schedule overriding the weather forecast. And it's about a system that trusts you to stay buckled even when the sign is off. But here's the rule that pilots never write down. Every pilot knows the 10,000-foot rule is a guideline, not a guarantee. Some follow it strictly, others bend it. The best pilots, the ones with 15,000 hours, keep the sign on until the cabin is perfectly configured. They know that the passenger who unbuckles at the chime is the one who gets hurt when the unexpected happens. The FAA has no hard rule for when the sign must be turned off, only that it must be on during takeoff and landing. The rest is pilot discretion, and that discretion is the hidden margin. In 2018, a Bombardier CRJ-900 experienced a pressurization failure at 36,000 feet. The captain initiated descent within 18 seconds. He reached 10,000 feet in 9 minutes. The seatbelt sign had been on for the entire flight. No injuries. Perfect outcome. The difference? The captain left the sign on because he knew the weather was unstable. He didn't care about passenger comfort. He cared about the chain. That's the core truth. The seatbelt sign is a designed margin, a signal that keeps passengers in their seats during critical phases. But the margin only works if the pilot uses it correctly. And the pilot only uses it correctly if he prioritizes safety over schedule. The 12-minute oxygen mask timer forces pilots to descend faster. The seatbelt sign forces passengers to stay seated. Both are designed to protect, but only when the system works as intended. The system fails when the pilot turns the sign off too early, when the airline pressures the crew, when the passenger unbuckles at the chime. And that's why the safest passengers are the ones who understand the hidden logic. You've landed 100 times, you've unbuckled at the chime every time, but the next time you hear that click, that sound that signals the end of the climb, you'll know the truth. The seatbelt sign is not a suggestion, it's a signal from the cockpit. A signal that the pilot is choosing between your safety and the airline's schedule. And the best pilots keep the sign on longer than the rule requires, because they know what you now know. Every flight you've ever taken has been shaped by decisions you never saw. From the oxygen mask timer to the seatbelt sign chime, the cockpit's logic is designed to protect you without your awareness. The 12-minute timer is one example. The seatbelt sign is another. And there are dozens more. In the next video, we'll look at the hidden rule pilots use to decide when to turn off the sign, and why flight attendants sit on their hands during takeoff. The rule they never write down, the signal they give to the cabin. But for now, one more truth. The safest passengers are the ones who stay buckled, even when the sign is off, even when the pilot says it's safe. Because the turbulence you can't see is the turbulence that hurts. And the chime you just heard? It's not the end of the climb. It's the beginning of a choice. Every pilot makes it. Every passenger lives with it. And now you know. The seatbelt sign is just the visible layer. Below it, a deeper system operates in silence. Every flight attendant knows the secret hand signal. 2 fingers tapped on the galley counter means the pilot is about to turn off the sign. A flat palm means stay seated, turbulence ahead. No words, no announcement, just a gesture that communicates risk faster than any interphone call. You've seen this signal, you just didn't know what it meant. Flight attendants sit on their hands during takeoff for the same reason. The brace position is not random. It's a practiced alignment of spine, neck and pelvis designed to reduce injury during impact. But the reason they sit on their hands, palms flat on their thighs, fingers spread, is specific. It prevents them from gripping the seat and breaking their thumbs during a sudden deceleration. The rule is written in the crew manual, but the reason is never explained to passengers. Here's what happens when the seatbelt sign stays on for an extended period. The pilot has made a decision. The risk outweighs the comfort. But the decision is not always about weather. Sometimes it's about the flight attendant. In 2020, a JetBlue flight experienced severe turbulence during meal service. The seatbelt sign had been on for 22 minutes, but the flight attendant, a veteran with 18 years of experience, ignored the sign and continued serving drinks. She was thrown against the galley wall. She suffered a concussion and a broken collarbone. The NTSB report noted that the seatbelt sign had been on, but the flight attendant felt pressure to complete service. The airline's performance metrics prioritized speed over safety. That's the hidden layer you never see. The seatbelt sign is not a hard barrier, it's a suggestion. And the suggestion is only as strong as the person who enforces it. Now, consider the cockpit door. After 9/11, every commercial aircraft reinforced the door. But the reinforcement is not just physical. It's procedural. The door is locked from the inside. No code, no key, just a latch that can only be released from the flight deck. But here's the paradox. The door is designed to keep threats out, but it also keeps the pilots in. And that creates a vulnerability that most passengers never consider. In 2015, a Germanwings flight crashed into the French Alps. The co-pilot locked the captain out of the cockpit. The door held. The captain couldn't break in. The aircraft descended into terrain. The procedure for cockpit entry is hidden. Pilots have a 4-digit code. The flight attendant dials it. A buzzer sounds in the cockpit. The pilot has 5 seconds to unlock the door. If he doesn't, the door stays locked. The system is designed to prevent hijackers from storming the cockpit, but it also prevents the crew from intervening when the pilot is incapacitated. Or worse. That's the hidden cost of security. Every procedural layer creates a new vulnerability. The stronger the barrier, the harder it is to breach, and the harder it is to save. You've seen the cockpit door on every flight. You've never thought about what it really means. Now, let's look at the lavatory lock. It's magnetic. When the seatbelt sign is on, the lavatory door locks automatically. You can't open it from the inside. You can't open it from the outside. The lock is designed to prevent passengers from being trapped in the lavatory during turbulence. But the lock also prevents flight attendants from entering if a passenger collapses. In 2019, a passenger suffered a cardiac arrest in the lavatory. The seatbelt sign was on. The flight attendant tried to open the door. It wouldn't budge. She had to call the cockpit to override the lock. By the time the door opened, the passenger had stopped breathing. The hidden cost of safety. Every system that protects you also creates a risk. The seatbelt sign, the cockpit door, the lavatory lock. They're all designed to prevent a specific failure, but they also create new failure modes that no one anticipated. That's the truth the airline never tells you. The safest passengers understand the system's real priorities. They stay buckled when the sign is off. They don't rush to the lavatory during turbulence. They know that the hidden layer, the unwritten rules, the unspoken signals is what keeps them safe. And now you know. The seatbelt sign chime is not just a sound, it's a signal that the pilot has made a choice that will either protect you or expose you to risk you'll never see. The next time you hear that click, remember the chain. The 30-second rule. The hidden hand signal. The cockpit door that holds both security and vulnerability. The lavatory lock that saves and traps. Every flight is a negotiation between safety and schedule, between crew capability and passenger convenience, between the visible world and the hidden one. And you, the passenger in 14A, are the last to know which side is winning. But now you know. The safest passengers are the informed ones. The ones who understand that the seatbelt sign is not about turbulence. The ones who stay buckled even when the chime says it's safe. The ones who never rush to the lavatory when the sign is on. Because the hidden logic is always there. It's in the pilot's voice, in the flight attendant's hand signal, in the chime you hear after every takeoff. And now you hear it differently. The seatbelt sign clicks off again. A new flight, a new decision. The pilot has made his choice. And you know what that choice really means? The mechanism that controls the lavatory lock is a solenoid, a small electromagnetic switch that engages when the seatbelt sign circuit activates. The same circuit that powers the chime. The same circuit that controls the overhead sign. But here's what the manual doesn't say. The solenoid can fail. When it fails, The door locks permanently. The passenger inside cannot open it. The crew outside cannot open it. The only override is a mechanical key stored in the cockpit, behind the locked door. In 2017, a passenger was trapped in a lavatory for 28 minutes. The seatbelt sign was off. The solenoid had jammed. The flight attendant called the cockpit. The pilot couldn't find the key. He had never been trained on its location. The passenger missed his connection. The airline issued a voucher. No NTSB report was filed because no injury occurred. But the failure was real. Every system you trust has a hidden weakness. The lavatory lock, the seatbelt sign, the cockpit door. They form a web of dependencies. When one fails, the others amplify the risk. That's the system logic you never see. Now, look at the overhead bin. The latch mechanism is designed to withstand 9 Gs of force. That's the FAA certification standard. But the bin itself, the plastic shell, is not tested to the same standard. In 2018, an overhead bin door opened during severe turbulence. A carry-on bag fell out and struck a passenger in the head. The bin was certified. The bag was compliant. But the combination of forces exceeded the design margin. The hidden flaw. The overhead bin is not a storage container, it's a structural element. It absorbs crash loads. It distributes force. And when it fails, the failure cascades. You've placed your bag in the bin 100 times. You've never thought about what holds it there. That's the point. The airline system is designed to be invisible. The more you notice, the more you question. And questioning leads to awareness, which leads to hesitation, which leads to slower boarding. So the system hides. But now you see. The seatbelt sign is not about you. The lavatory lock is not about convenience. The overhead bin is not about storage. They are layers of a survival system that operates independently of your awareness. And the safest passengers are the ones who understand the layers. You stay buckled. You don't rush the lavatory. You place your bag carefully. You listen to the pilot's voice for the hidden signals. Because the chime you just heard is not the end. It's the beginning of a choice. Every pilot makes it. Every flight attendant reinforces it. Every passenger lives with it. And now you understand it. The click of the seatbelt sign is the sound of decision. A decision that determines whether the flight continues routine or becomes a hidden emergency. The safest passengers stay buckled, even when the sign is off. Especially when the sign is off. Because the flight you board tomorrow will be the same as every flight you have already taken. The same hidden system. The same invisible decisions. The same seatbelt sign that clicks off at 10,000 feet, signaling a choice that will never be announced. The pilot will follow the unwritten rule. The flight attendant will sit on her hands during takeoff. The lavatory lock will engage and disengage on a schedule you will never see. And you will sit in your seat, buckled, aware. That is the only edge the system gives you. Not a longer oxygen mask timer, not a stronger cockpit door, not a seatbelt sign that stays on for every risk. Just knowledge. Knowledge that the chime is not a permission slip. That the pilot's decision happens in seconds, not minutes. That the safest place in the cabin is the seat you are already in, with the belt you have already fastened. You cannot control the turbulence. You cannot predict the decompression. You cannot override the solenoid in the lavatory door. But you can choose to stay buckled. That choice is the only margin that matters. The margin the system designed but cannot enforce. The margin that separates the passenger who walks off the plane from the one who doesn't. Every pilot knows this. Every flight attendant knows this. The airlines know this. And now you know it too. The seatbelt sign clicks off. The cabin stirs. The passenger in 14A reaches for her bag. But you stay seated, you stay buckled, you stay aware. Because the safest flight you ever take is the one where you understand the system. Not by obeying the chime, not by reading the card, but by seeing the hidden logic that runs beneath every takeoff, every climb, every landing. The seatbelt sign is not the rule. You are. And now, as the aircraft climbs through the inversion layer and the wing stops flexing, you settle deeper into 14A. The flight attendant passes with the drink cart. The passenger to your left pulls out a tablet. Everything feels normal. But normal is the surface. Normal is the mask. Normal is the seatbelt sign that clicks off at exactly the right moment because the pilot followed the chain perfectly. You can't see the 30-second rule at work. You can't hear the call out the first officer just made. You can't smell the dry lubricated seals that held the cockpit door secure through every stage of flight. But you know they exist. That knowledge changes nothing about the aircraft's systems. It changes nothing about the pilot's training or the FA's procedure or the solenoid's reliability. It changes everything about you. The passenger who understands the hidden logic does not sit in fear. She sits in awareness. She hears the chime as a signal, not an instruction. She watches the FA's hands for the unspoken gesture. She reads the pilot's voice for the brake that means something changed. She stays buckled, not because the sign says so, because the system only works when every link in the chain holds. And the link that matters most, the one link you control, is the buckle across your lap. The 12-minute oxygen mask timer will never be enough if the pilot hesitates. The cockpit door will never be strong enough if the pilot inside is compromised. The seatbelt sign will never be fast enough if the turbulence hits without warning. But the buckle holds. That single buckle is the margin the system can't enforce. It's your decision. Every flight. If you want to fly with awareness instead of illusion, subscribe. Because I reveal the hidden logic that turns passengers into survivors. And in the comments, leave the word buckle if you've just committed to staying seated no matter what the sign says. It holds because you chose to fasten it. Because you understood that the system's final margin is not the regulation, the checklist, or the call-out. It is the simple, deliberate act of staying seated with the belt secured. That is the truth the airline never writes in the safety card. That is the secret the cockpit never announces over the interphone. That is the revelation that changes how you hear every chime from this flight forward. The click of the seatbelt sign at 10,000 feet is the sound of a decision already made. The pilot chose. The chain held. The system worked. But the click you hear when you land, that same chime, that same signal, means something different. It means the chain held for one more flight. It means the hidden logic operated as designed. It means you stayed aware through every phase of an invisible emergency you will never know occurred. And that is the only outcome that matters. The safest passengers do not fly without fear. They fly without illusion. They see the cabin not as a comfortable tube, but as a layered survival system. They know the seatbelt sign is a tool, not a promise. They know the cockpit door is a barrier with a vulnerability. They know the oxygen mask timer is a designed margin that assumes perfection. And they strap in anyway. Because the alternative is not awareness. The alternative is the passenger who unbuckles at the chime, who rushes the lavatory during turbulence, who trusts the system without understanding its limits. That passenger exists on every flight. But that passenger is not you. You are the one who stays seated. The one who hears the chime as a beginning, not an end. The one who knows that the seatbelt sign marks the start of a choice, and that the choice belongs to the pilot, the flight attendant, and the passenger who refuses to unbuckle. The aircraft descends through 10,000 feet. The flaps extend. The landing gear locks into place. The chime sounds one final time. The flight is over. But the awareness stays. It stays in the way you watch the wing flex on the next takeoff, in the way you wait for the chime before reaching for your bag, in the way you strap in before the sign even illuminates. That awareness is the only safety system that never fails, because it is not bolted to the floor. It is not wired to the electrical bus. It is not calibrated at the factory and sealed behind an inspection panel. It is yours. And it is the one thing the airline cannot design, cannot mandate, and cannot take away. The seatbelt sign clicks off. You stay buckled. And that is the safest choice you will ever make.